Hello and welcome back. Today we are continuing the laws of errors in the Torah. What happens when you find an error in the Torah? This is one of the great proofs that the Torah is something that lasted for thousands of years and yet has never changed. Because the minute that in any synagogue around the world there's an error in the text, we are forbidden to read from it. Such lengths we went to in order to ensure that the Torah is always the same around the world. Because if we would allow us to continue to read from it, we would leave it the way it is with the mistakes and we'd get used to it. And this is one of the proofs that the Torah never changed for 3,000 years. There's many other proofs, but this is one of them. Another proof would be by the fact that we as a people have never done things in a book without actually living by it. So, if I play a game and I say one word and there's 100 people in the room, and I expect by the end of the room that word to be passed over. So I pass it over to the person next to me and then to the next person after them. What are the odds that that word will be remembered properly? And if it's a complicated word, even less likely that it will be remembered. But what happens if I say, here's the word, and I want you to act it over? Act the word as well. Live with it. Put it on your door. Put it in your house. Put that word, live with it for a while, and then pass it on to the person next to you. And then that person also needs to live with it and pass it on. And I give you a book with the word written in it. Now pass it to the person next to you. Not only do you write it, you wear it on you, you put it on your door, which is what we do. Also, you write it down and you have it with you wherever you go. So there are many, many ways that Judaism has ensured that the text never changed throughout history, even though it's been passed from generation to generation. And one of them is the text. If the text has any errors, it is forbidden for us to read from it. So let's continue and finalize this chapter 24 on the laws of what happens if you find an invalid mark on a Torah. And we said already till now that in a case when it's invalid, you cannot read from it. So number 7 of chapter 24 says, if you find an invalid mark whilst you're reading the Torah, and now you're required to bring out another Torah, if you're now at the moment where you've just in between calling one person and another person, in between aliyot, where people are called up to the Torah, so then at that moment, you take out that Torah, another Torah. The Sephardic custom is actually you leave the invalid Torah on the bima, on display, and you bring out a kosher one and put it next to it. And only later on do you put both Torahs away. The Ashkenazic custom is generally to take the invalid Torah and put it back in the ark immediately. But either customs is that we cannot read from that Sefer Torah. So we take out another one, and we continue from the area that we stopped. And we complete the number of people that read so far. Meaning, if we've had 3 that got called up so far, and then you found an invalid mark on it, we'd call up, if it's Shabbat, we'd call up another 4, and that's it. Actually, this is during the week. So if it's 1 or 2, we'd call up 1 more, and that's it. We don't go back to all the beginning and start over again. Those that were already called up in the past, even though now we found that this Torah is invalid, they are counted and are good enough as people that were part or being part of the reading. If it's Shabbat, where we have 7 people that are called up, and we can add more people anyway. If it's possible to read from the next Torah another 7 readers, then you should do it. Because this would include those that say that somebody who's read from a Torah which was invalid, their aliyah, their calling is not counted. So on Shabbat, since there's many people that are called up, and we can always add more people, will try and add 7 new people because of the invalid mark that was in the Torah, and whatever was read till now will not be counted. And the reason why Shabbat we're more able to add new people, even though it's been invalidated, and the people in the past have not been considered as valid as being called up for the Torah. Why on Shabbat specifically do we now recalculate the number of people that get called up? Because anyway on Shabbat we add people to be called up to the Torah because it's a special day. So if anyway we're doing that, we may as well just call up 7 new people to the Torah. Number 8, if let's say you find an invalid mark whilst you're reading, so the person's reading, all of a sudden he sees a mistake, there's a letter missing. On this point, there's arguments and customs in the Torah, in our customs in our people. Each place should go according to his custom. In a place where there is no fixed custom, meaning everyone's not sure what to do, best to do what's written in the Sulchan Aruch, the book of Jewish law. To not make a blessing on an invalid Torah. We don't close the Torah with another blessing. We just stop, close the Torah. We take out a new one and we continue from the place that we stopped. If you stop in a place which is a verse, so you're in the middle of a verse and you had to stop. So then when you open the new Torah that you bring out, go back to the beginning of the verse. You don't continue from the middle of a verse. And you continue and you complete the whole section. And the person that was originally called up completes the final blessing. He doesn't have to go and start a new introductory blessing, the beginning blessing. Only the completed blessing. When somebody gets called up, there's a blessing before and there's a blessing after. So he doesn't get to have to repeat the blessing that he said before, even though when he made that blessing, it was on an invalid Torah. He does not have to do a first blessing because that blessing that he made on the invalid Torah is considered as good enough and it's okay. And also, if they didn't even read for the person that got called up, he made his blessing on the Torah. Then as soon as they open it, they realize, oh, there's a mistake. They didn't even start reading to that blessing. They found the invalid mark immediately after the blessing. We close that Torah, we take out a new Torah. The person does not need to make another first blessing. You just continue to read. There is no difference between a last reading or the first reading. It doesn't make a difference if it's Mafte, Rishon, Sheni, Shvi, Shlishi, all of them. We continue from where we left off. We take out a new Torah and we continue. No need for the person that was called up to make a new blessing. Now, we as Sephardic custom, our custom is that we do not have to read from the beginning of the reading. And we are not medakdek, we're not particular on Shabbat also to go back to the beginning of reading, and we continue according to Sephardic custom. This is brought down in Orach Chaim, that we do not go back to the beginning. Let's continue. Nimtza pesul, number 9. Nimtza pesul b'sefer Torah. If you find a invalid mark in the Sefer Torah, and there's no other Torah around. So you only have one Torah in shul, and they found an invalid mark in it. The law is, the halacha is, mashlimim bo minyan hakorim belo brachot. We complete all the people that are called up without any blessings at all. So this Torah is invalid. You can't use it. The minyan, the halacha is here that we can continue to read from this Sefer Torah because we already have been reading from it. But we would continue without anyone who gets called up, without anyone to have to make brachot. We'll just continue reading right till the end. No blessings are made on the Torah in this situation. Number 10. Some say that if there's an invalid mark in the Torah, in one section of the Torah, so the Torah scroll is really 5 books, the 5 books of Moses. There are 5 books inside of the Torah. And you're currently reading, let's say, Shemot, and you found the mark in the section of Bereshit. So there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Let's say you're reading Exodus, and you find the mark and the mistake in Genesis, the book of Genesis. So you're busy reading the book of Shemot. It's okay to continue in such a case. So that's what we're going to see now. If you find the invalid mark in one section of the Torah scroll, which is, let's say, in Genesis, you are allowed to read in another section, in another part of the scroll, which is another book completely in the scroll. If let's say the invalid mark is in Bereshit, you can read with the blessings in the book of Shemot. And because there is an opinion like this, you can rely on this opinion in a dire situation, where it's not possible to fix the Torah, either because it's Shabbat or because you're in a town where it's not possible, there's no scribe to help you fix it. Or Shabbat or Yom Tov, or Shabbat and Yom Tov. So in such a case, you can read from another book completely, and that would be okay. Again here, the Kaf HaChaim brings down that in such a case, we would read without brachot, and we would not read with a brachot. So here it says with a bracha, but the Sephardic custom is we would read from another Torah, even if it's 2 separate scrolls. So it was a psul, an invalid mark in the book of Bereshit, Genesis, and you're reading from Exodus. No matter what, you will not call up someone with a blessing. Nevertheless, on Shabbat, we do not take out another Torah, because the Torah reading of Shabbat Mincha, the Shabbat afternoon Torah reading, is not such a duty, because we already had a reading that day. And remember, we say that every 3 days we need to have a Torah reading, but we already had one on Shabbat. This is just an afternoon, Shabbat afternoon, extra mitzvah to read for the week that's coming up. But if you find an invalid mark in the Torah in such a case, you put the Torah back, and we do not continue to read, because there's not such a requirement to continue to read. The only reason why we read on Shabbat afternoon is because for those that are not going to be in shul on Monday and Thursday in the synagogue, so we read for them on Shabbat Mincha. So we read for them the next week's Torah portion. But if we see that there's an invalid mark during that reading, we would return the Sefer Torah, and we would not bring out a new Torah. Number 11. So the Torah is made of parchments, and in each parchment is woven together. That's how you have the scroll. It's many parchments that are woven together. They have to be woven in a certain way. So if, let's say, the sewing of the two, one of the scrolls of the parchments, the sewing became undone. If most of the parchment is woven well together, just on the top section, let's say it's unwoven, you can still continue to read it. But if not, the weaving has become undone on most of the parchment, you have to close this Torah and use another. If there's no other Torah, if the tear, the unweaving of the parchment is on the chumash that you actually are reading from, which means, like we said, the scroll has 5 portions in it, 5 books of Moses in it, and if the area that you're reading on is undone, you cannot read it unless there is at least 5 sewings in the area that became undone. So you've got, let's say, many parchments put together, and one parchment, it was like this, and it started coming undone. If you find that the area that it's connected still has 5 weaves, 5 sewings together, then you can still read from it. If the tear or the unweaving is in another section, in another scroll, you can read from this book, this Sefer Torah, even if there's only 2 weavings left, you could still read from the Torah. So if it's 5 tefirot, you cannot read, but if it's less than that and it's only 2, you can. We, the Sfaradim, hold differently. We hold that nonetheless, no matter what happens, if most of the parchment is not woven together and it doesn't have 5 sewings strongly put together, we cannot read from this Torah no matter what happens. And even if it's undone in the beginning of the Torah or the end of the Torah, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't have 5 strong sewings, we cannot read from it. And that is whether it's in the section that we're reading, not the section we're reading, it doesn't make a difference. Always, according to Sephardic custom, we would have to close it and put it back. It's interesting to point out that it's less likely in the Sephardic Sefer Torah that we have this issue of it coming undone, because the scroll is held in its own box. It has a whole box that holds it, so it's never pulled as much as when they do the Hagba'ah, the lifting in the Ashkenazic custom. They would lift the amudim, the pillars, and it's always more likely that it can come undone. Let's continue anyway, but that's the halacha in general. Number 12. If you find wax or some kind of fats that fell onto a word or a letter, if it's the weekday, just remove it. But if it's Shabbat or Yom Tov and you can't because of kibus, you're washing, you're cleaning. So, if you could see the letters anyway through the wax, you should read. If the wax covers the letters to a point that you can't see the letters, if the wax is in a place that you don't need to read from, so then you can continue to read the Torah. You can continue to read the Torah with the blessings, because only an external cover that's on the letters, it doesn't invalidate it. But if it's in a place that you need to read from, and we have a rule that we can never read even one word from the Torah which is not directly from the letters. Therefore, if it's possible to remove the wax or the fats on Shabbat or Yom Tov with the backhand, because you're not allowed to directly remove dirt on Shabbat, so you have to do it in a way which is, let's say, with the back of your hand or with your elbow or something like that. And it's a case where you can't do that because it dried. It's a case where you can do that And you can remove it with the back of your hand because it's Shabbat, and you can do it because the wax dried so much. You just, what you do is you fold the parchment a little bit, and through that the wax will just fall off. Sulchan, then do that. But if it's not possible to do such a thing, you cannot read from it, because we cannot read from a Torah where we can't see the words. It's important to point out, on the weekday, when we do remove this wax or the fats from the letters, if it's on the name of Hashem, Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, it's on his name. Yashkich, we have to be very careful, so that you don't come, God forbid, to scratching out the name of Hashem. So how would you remove? It's risky. How would you remove oils or wax that is covering the letter of Hashem? The best way is to heat it a little bit, make it warm. Use something that's warm, maybe a cup that's warm with warm water, and use the bottom of it, it's warm. And that would then weaken the wax. Yelech hashava or kislev, and the wax and the fats will be removed, and it will be okay to use. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good day. That's the end of the section on what happens if a Torah comes invalid. Thank you very much for listening.